So today, I wanted to look forward and discuss The Elder Scrolls 6. Not so much the storyline. I know there has been a heck of a lot of speculation about where the game is going to be set, etc. Right now, I'm more interested in exploring how Bethesda can improve upon the mechanics of Skyrim to make the world even more immersive than its predecessors. I'm Twiglets2, let's get into the video. First up, combat improvements. So, what's the problem? Skyrim's magic and ranged combat felt pretty decent. Then hand-to-hand combat was okay, but is okay good enough? You have to admit that Skyrim's combat was clunky. It did have flashes of brilliance, but it generally felt like you were swiping at thin air, even when you were supposedly smashing your opponent's face in. The combat felt even less realistic when multiple enemies became involved. Although blocking with a shield or a weapon is possible, and reasonably satisfying, there must be a lot of room for improvement. For your average gamer, most fights descended into smacking each other, hoping you can work your way through all the enemies in the room without you having to consume too many health potions. My point is, the combat in Skyrim was decent, but I also think combat is the low-hanging fruit that could be easily improved upon in the next installment. Taking some inspiration from other games, The Witcher 3's combat felt very solid, whether fighting a single enemy or a group of enemies, and the parry system worked pretty well. However, The Witcher 3 was all third person, and The Elder Scrolls 6 is undoubtedly going to give you the option of first person and third person perspectives. Although this is great for immersion, the ability to switch between first and third person perspectives is a real challenge for designing the hand-to-hand combat experience, an issue The Witcher 3 didn't have to deal with. And that's before you even think about the VR aspect, that I'm sure will be included. It is a difficult balancing act. Taking it to the one extreme, you could ask the player to press one button and your character performs a 10-second sequence of complex and acrobatic swordplay, beheading your enemies at the end. Problem solved, whether you're in first or third person. But where's the challenge in that? It might look good, but it would get real boring real quick. On the other end of the scale, you can't expect the player to micromanage each limb of your character in real time during a sword fight against multiple enemies. Even after 3 cups of coffee and a can of Red Bull, I wouldn't be able to keep up with that. And the end result certainly wouldn't feel realistic. To be honest, I can't think of a game that has really cracked hand-to-hand combat in both first and third person perspectives. So I'm really keen to see how they tackle this in The Elder Scrolls 6. My final point on combat is to give an honourable mention to the finishing moves. They are awesome, and I'll be very disappointed if they aren't included in the next game. Moving on. We all want the maps of any RPG to be bigger and bigger, and when it comes to RPGs, size definitely does matter. But I don't think this should be at the expense of how connected the world feels. I would much rather a smaller world to roam around if it means moving between different areas, interiors, exteriors, seamlessly. I've nothing against a loading screen and some useful tips or a snippet from the lore of the game, but having to wait 20 seconds each time you want to go into a house, or seeing others teleporting into and out of buildings, is a little jarring. Grand Theft Auto 5 gave us a ridiculously huge map, but only a handful of buildings could actually be entered, or sometimes a building only opened up for a particular mission. The Witcher 3 did a slightly better job at letting us inside more buildings without a loading screen, which makes sense as it's a newer game. Roaming around Novigrad, there were many buildings you could walk into and out of freely, but even then, much of the city was off limits. I get that you shouldn't just be able to walk into any old room, that's totally unrealistic, but knowing that it's possible would make the world feel more alive. Perhaps in a few years, whenever The Elder Scrolls 6 is released, technology will have advanced enough for us to have a map far larger than that of Skyrim, but also decrease the amount of loading screens. You'd hope so anyway. It would open up more and more of the buildings to be explored seamlessly. But how realistic is this? I haven't a clue. I'm not a game developer, just a demanding, ignorant consumer who doesn't know how difficult this stuff is to do. But it's not all about size. There's something else that may be even more important than how big the world is. Being able to explore a world that's constantly changing would really take things to the next level. Whether it's new buildings being created, old ones being destroyed, or simply having the decorators in. The idea of having the environment change throughout a game has always caught my attention. This isn't anything new. Remember Ocarina of Time? How the Hyrule Castle town changed from a bustling, happy market to a desolate zombie wasteland? Or Fable 2, where your actions as a child in Bowerstone affect how the city looks later in the game. Now, all of these are nice, but don't really scratch the surface when trying to imitate something more realistic. Don't get me wrong, I would like to see much bigger cities with much higher populations. Todd Howard acknowledged in a recent interview that Whiterun, with its population of about 20, is not big, but exploring a city knowing that you can influence how it looks, or that is constantly changing because of the actions of those that live there, is a really exciting thought. Skyrim had plenty of side quests that added hours and hours to the game, whether it's becoming a werewolf with the companions, or a nightingale as part of the Thieves Guild questline. But I did find that the smaller side quests were a little lackluster at times. Compare this to The Witcher 3, where even the smallest side quest would turn into a beautifully written story. In fact, I'd argue a lot of the side quests in The Witcher rivaled the main storyline itself. I realise I'm using The Witcher as an example constantly, but to be honest, it's one of the best comparisons we have. It's a newer game that got a lot of things right. Plus, most of you will have played it. There's not much point of me using an obscure game you've never heard of as an example. With that out of the way, how's this for a crazy idea? Unique quests generated by artificial intelligence. Whole conversations that can be uniquely built on the spot for individual players, a bit like the procedurally generated worlds of No Man's Sky. This starts to get a bit mind-boggling, but when you think about it, the potential is pretty unreal. And why not? This game isn't coming out until, 2023? Technology will have moved on massively by then. Is it really that unrealistic? To be honest, one of the things I'd really like to be able to do is just get a normal job. I know that might sound boring, but being forced to get some bar work at the beginning of the game as you build yourself up could be fun. Where better to find side quests than while pouring people's drinks for them, then investing your salary into your questing gear, or perhaps one day owning the bar yourself. You can go live in the wild, not needing money for food or clothes if you want, but I would at least like the option of being a respected member of society for a while. One of my favourite parts of Fable 2 was getting a job and investing in property. Maybe you can work towards starting up your own village and growing it to something that's worth protecting. Or maybe this is starting to sound a bit too much like The Sims. I want every AI to have a life that makes sense. Day, night, work, home. I'd like to know that every AI is wandering around with a purpose. Or if they're just standing there, they at least have a reason to. Oh, and footsteps that actually walk upstairs properly. And when the AI wants to turn around, it doesn't just spin on the spot like a possessed dummy. It would also be nice if when you're looting, your character actually looks in the barrel, and you can see the items there, and remove them for real, like in Red Dead Redemption 2. Moving on. Graphics. This one won't take long. With each new game, we expect better graphics, and an improved engine. And they've already confirmed that we will get them. I just hope we can avoid any Halo Infinite style game reveal issues. Progression. For anyone that's played Morrowind or Oblivion, you'll be well aware that Skyrim really simplified the progression of your character's skills, making it much easier to level up your character by simply making you better at the things that you do, and punish you less for decisions you made earlier in the game. I think this was a great move, and is one of the main reasons Skyrim was loved by so many. I really hope they keep this in The Elder Scrolls 6. The voice acting in Skyrim was amazing, and I'm sure it's fair to assume there will be plenty more in the next installment. But do we want Bethesda to give us our own voice? Or would we prefer to remain a mute, whose voice is confined to text on the screen? To be fair, the Dragonborn gave us the occasional Fusroda, but was otherwise pretty much silent. I don't know about you, but I don't have particularly strong feelings either way on this one. Obviously, it would be difficult for Bethesda to come up with a single voice, given how different an Argonian sounds compared to a High Elf. But even a whole group of voices to choose from would struggle to satisfy everyone. As character creation is such an important part of these games, the safe bet is surely to keep things the same as Skyrim. Multiplayer. Now, I've noticed some trends in the gaming world in recent years, and that is increasingly the most popular games are often free-to-play and cross-play. And this makes sense. Removing the barriers that stopped you playing your favourite games with your friends is a no-brainer. But let's be honest, it's highly unlikely that a AAA title, such as The Elder Scrolls, would ever be free-to-play. You'd always expect to pay top dollar. And now that Microsoft owns Bethesda, it doesn't look likely that Xbox and PC players would be able to play with their PlayStation buddies. But having said all of that, will there be a built-in multiplayer for The Elder Scrolls 6? Clearly, Skyrim was able to become one of the best RPG games of all time without multiplayer. But if I'm playing an awesome game, I want to share it with my friends. So how might that look? Would two of you be tackling quests together, or as a group? Would that just screw with what will undoubtedly already be a very long and complicated list of outstanding quests? And let's be honest, Bethesda games can be a little buggy at the best of times. Without adding this sort of complication, perhaps they'll find a way of creating an entirely different area of the game that allows you to meet up with your friends and take on certain challenges together, without interfering with the single-player element of the game. All of these options have such great potential, and I really hope there's something along these lines when the game finally releases. I'm not wanting to force anybody into a multiplayer game. If they want this to play just like Skyrim, then great. But having the multiplayer option would really expand the game for me. Dragons. In this part of the video, I want to deliver a personal message directly to Todd Howard, who I'm sure will be among the first to watch this video. So here we go. Todd, you've introduced us to dragons, so you can't take them away from us now. You can't just give us awesome dragons in Skyrim and not include them in your subsequent games. It's not an option. But can a story that's not based in Skyrim work with them? Assuming The Elder Scrolls 6 isn't based in Skyrim, can we live without them? As you may be able to tell, I personally think there should be dragons in the next game. But how big a part they can or should play in the game is the question I'm mulling over. A lot depends on where they go with the story, as having dragons flying around is a pretty big deal that can't just be ignored. But perhaps there's just one side quest in the game that culminates in a one-off battle with a dragon, as a nod to Skyrim. It would be a shame to only include one dragon battle in the game, but at least that could be done without having an impact on the main story, or generally complicate matters to do with location and timeline. Now on to the final point. The unexpected. So this point is an acknowledgement of what really makes a great game. I can sit here and list off everything I want as a player, based on all the games I've played, but meeting my expectations isn't what makes a great game a real winner. It's giving me something I didn't even know I wanted. I don't know about you, but in the run-up to Skyrim's release, I watched every trailer, every demo, every live-action bloody trailer. I thought I knew what to expect. And still, the game absolutely blew me away and exceeded all expectations. The mountain of quests and the sheer awesomeness of Skyrim itself. And that's what really made the game so memorable. I can sit here and point out parts of The Witcher 3's side quests that I think should be incorporated, and the bits that made Skyrim so good that should be rolled into the next installment. But at the end of the day, what will really make this game as incredible as Skyrim is the stuff I don't know about. The things they're developing behind the scenes to blow my tiny little mind. And I really cannot wait to see what they come up with. That's enough of me rambling on for today. As you may be able to tell, I'm really looking forward to the next installment of the Elder Scrolls series. If they're not going to give us any detail for a while yet, then we can still enjoy speculating about what they may include in the next installment, while we enjoy our 50th playthrough of Skyrim, where we still find surprises the developers put into the game nearly a decade ago. I've been Twiglets2. You've been an amazing audience, so feel free to like and subscribe. See ya.